At Gate 32 of the bustling international airport, passengers lined up to board Flight 817, a red-eye journey from New York to London. Among them was Marcus Hayes, a tall man in his early 40s with an aura of quiet confidence. Dressed in a tailored navy suit and polished shoes, Marcus carried himself like someone who had earned every ounce of respect he commanded. He was not just any traveler. He was the CEO of one of the largest tech companies in the world, Hayes Global Technologies. Marcus had spent the day meeting investors and closing deals that would shape the future of artificial intelligence. Exhausted but triumphant, he looked forward to resting in the comfort of business class during the long flight ahead. His ticket confirmed it. Seat 5A, a window seat where he could stretch out and perhaps catch some much-needed sleep. As Marcus approached the gate agent, he noticed subtle glances from the two flight attendants assisting with boarding. They exchanged whispers behind their iPads, occasionally stealing quick looks at him. At first, Marcus dismissed it as nothing unusual. Airports were full of people observing strangers, but something about their body language made him uneasy. "Good evening, sir," said the younger flight attendant, her tone polite but distant. She scanned his boarding pass and paused for a moment longer than necessary. "It seems there's been a change to your reservation." Marcus frowned. "A change? I booked this ticket months ago." "Yes, sir," she replied without looking up. "Your seat has been reassigned to economy. You'll now be seated in row 42, middle seat." Marcus blinked, certain he'd misheard her. "Excuse me?" The older flight attendant chimed in, her voice firmer. "That's correct, Mr. Hayes. There's been an overbooking issue in business class. We apologize for the inconvenience." "An overbooking issue?" Marcus knew better. Overbookings happened, but they rarely affected premium passengers. Business class travelers were prioritized above all else. It was part of the airline's promise to its high-paying customers. Yet here he stood, being told his seat no longer existed. He glanced around the crowded gate area. Other passengers watched curiously, some pretending not to notice while others openly stared. A few recognized him. His face had appeared on magazine covers after all, but no one stepped forward or offered support. It was as if everyone expected him to accept this sudden downgrade without question. Marcus felt heat rising in his chest. This wasn't just about a seat. It was about how quickly assumptions were made based on appearance alone. To these attendants, he might have looked like any other weary traveler instead of the billionaire innovator, whose company employed thousands. And though Marcus prided himself on staying calm under pressure, this blatant disregard for his status stung deeply. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor," Marcus said evenly, his voice steady despite the frustration bubbling beneath the surface. The younger attendant hesitated before nodding. "Of course, sir. Let me see what I can do." But even as she walked away, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was about more than a simple seating mix-up. It was about dignity, fairness, and the unspoken biases that often dictated how people were treated. Little did anyone know those 5 minutes at Gate 32 would set off a chain reaction that would ripple far beyond the confines of the airplane. For now, Marcus simply adjusted the strap of his carry-on bag and waited, his mind racing with questions and possibilities. What started as an ordinary flight was about to become anything but. The supervisor arrived a few minutes later, a middle-aged woman with a clipboard tucked under her arm and an apologetic smile plastered across her face. Her name tag read, "Linda," and she moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had dealt with countless disgruntled passengers over the years. "Mr. Hayes, I understand there's been some confusion regarding your seat assignment," Linda began, her tone smooth but tinged with caution. She glanced at the flight attendant standing nearby before turning her attention back to Marcus. "Let me assure you we're doing everything we can to resolve this." Marcus crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. "I appreciate that, but I'd like to know why my confirmed business class seat is suddenly unavailable. This isn't just about inconvenience, it's about accountability." Linda hesitated, clearly caught off guard by his calm yet assertive demeanor. Most passengers in such situations would either explode in anger or grudgingly accept the downgrade. But Marcus wasn't most passengers. He exuded authority, even when standing in line at an airport gate. Well, sir, Linda said carefully, due to unforeseen circumstances, we needed to reassign several seats. Unfortunately, your original seat was given to another passenger. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Unforeseen circumstances? Care to elaborate? Before Linda could respond, one of the flight attendants interjected. Sir, it's standard procedure during overbooking situations. We prioritize based on loyalty program status and booking timelines. Marcus turned to her, his gaze steady. And what exactly does that mean for me? Are you saying my loyalty, or lack thereof, is the reason I've been moved? The flight attendant flushed slightly but didn't back down. It's not personal, sir, it's simply how our system works. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus couldn't help but notice the subtle shift in the atmosphere around him. Passengers who had been quietly observing now leaned closer. Their curiosity piqued. Some whispered among themselves, while others pulled out their phones, perhaps, to document the unfolding scene. Linda cleared her throat, trying to regain control of the conversation. Mr. Hayes, if you'll allow us a moment, we'll do our best to find a solution. Perhaps we can offer you additional compensation for the inconvenience. Compensation. The word grated on Marcus. It wasn't about money, it was about being treated fairly. He had built his entire career on principles of equity and innovation. And here he was, reduced to arguing over a seat because of decisions made behind closed doors. I don't want compensation, Marcus replied firmly. I want answers. Who decided to move me? And why wasn't I informed earlier? Linda exchanged a nervous glance with the flight attendants. Clearly, they hadn't anticipated this level of scrutiny. For a brief moment, Marcus almost felt sorry for them. Almost. We'll need to look into that, sir, Linda said finally, her voice softer now. In the meantime, may I escort you to the lounge while we sort this out? Marcus shook his head. No, thank you. I'd rather stay here until this matter is resolved. As Linda retreated to consult with her team, Marcus took a step back, allowing himself a moment to process the situation. He knew he could easily escalate the issue. His assistant was already on standby to call the airline's corporate office. But something held him back. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every person who had ever been dismissed or underestimated because of preconceived notions. A young woman standing nearby approached cautiously. She was holding a toddler in her arms and looked visibly exhausted. Excuse me, Mr. Hayes, she said softly. I'm so sorry for what's happening. I hope they fix it soon. Marcus offered her a small smile. Thank you. I appreciate that. Her kindness reminded him of why he fought so hard for fairness, not just for himself, but for people like her, who deserved respect regardless of their circumstances. Minutes ticked by, and the tension at Gate 32 grew palpable. Passengers continued to board, glancing nervously at Marcus as they passed. The flight attendants avoided making eye contact, their earlier confidence replaced by unease. Even Linda seemed rattled when she returned, clutching a piece of paper. Mr. Hayes, she began hesitantly. We've reviewed the situation, and, well, it appears there may have been an error in processing your reservation. An error. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He simply waited, letting the weight of her admission sink in. We'd like to offer you the first-class suite as a gesture of goodwill, Linda added quickly. It's the least we can do. For a moment, silence enveloped the gate area. All eyes were on Marcus, waiting to see how he would respond. Would he accept the upgrade and move on? Or would he demand more? Marcus studied Linda for a long moment before speaking. Thank you for addressing the issue. However, I'd like a written explanation of how this happened, and assurances that steps will be taken to prevent it in the future. Linda nodded, vigorously. Of course, sir, absolutely. As Marcus finally boarded the plane, he couldn't shake the feeling that this incident was far from over. What started as a simple seating dispute had exposed deeper flaws within the system, a system that valued appearances over fairness. And unbeknownst to anyone, those flaws were about to come crashing down in ways no one could have predicted. Marcus settled into the first-class suite, a plush cocoon of luxury that felt worlds apart from the cramped economy seat he had been assigned earlier. The leather seat reclined fully, offering more space than most hotel rooms. A flight attendant offered him champagne and a warm towel, her demeanor now excessively polite as she avoided meeting his eyes. Marcus accepted both but found little comfort in them. Despite the opulence surrounding him, his mind raced with thoughts about what had just transpired. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't merely an isolated incident. It was symptomatic of something much larger. As someone who had spent years advocating for equality and fairness in business, Marcus knew all too well how systemic biases operated. They weren't always blatant. Sometimes they hid behind policies, procedures, or even excuses like overbooking. He pulled out his phone, intending to send a quick email to his assistant about rescheduling a meeting once he landed. But before he could type a word, notifications began flooding in. His social media accounts were lighting up. Tweets, comments, and direct messages poured in faster than he could read them. Curious, Marcus opened Twitter and froze. Someone at the gate must have recorded the confrontation and posted it online. The video showed everything: the flight attendant's dismissive tones, Linda's fumbling attempts to explain the situation, and Marcus's composed yet firm responses. Within hours, the clip had gone viral, racking up millions of views and sparking heated debates across platforms. "Is this really how airlines treat their passengers?" One user tweeted, tagging the airline's official account. "This is unacceptable." "There's accountability. Respect," another chimed in, accompanied by a fiery emoji. Others pointed out the racial undertones of the incident, questioning whether Marcus would have faced the same treatment if he didn't happen to be black. Scrolling through the comments, Marcus felt a mix of emotions. On one hand, he appreciated the support from strangers who recognized the injustice. On the other, he couldn't ignore the growing outrage directed not only at the airline, but also at society's broader issues with bias and discrimination. Back at headquarters, Hayes Global Technologies communications team sprang into action. Messages from his PR director, Sophie, began pinging on his phone. Sophie: "Marcus, are you okay? Do you want us to issue a statement? This is blowing up." Sophie: "The press is calling. What's your stance?" Marcus sighed. He hadn't intended for this to become a public spectacle, but now there was no turning back. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every person who had ever been treated unfairly because of assumptions based on race, appearance, or status. Before responding to Sophie, Marcus decided to take matters into his own hands. He drafted a tweet, keeping it concise yet impactful. "Today I experienced firsthand how biases can manifest in everyday interactions. While mistakes happen, accountability matters. Let's use this moment to reflect on fairness and respect for everyone." Within minutes, the tweet exploded, receiving thousands of likes, retweets, and replies. Some praised his grace under pressure, while others shared their own stories of being mistreated by airlines or other institutions. The hashtag "Fairness for All" started trending alongside the original video. Meanwhile, the airline scrambled to respond. Their initial statement was vague and defensive, focusing on apologizing for any misunderstanding without addressing the core issue. Predictably, this only fueled the fire. Critics accused the airline of failing to acknowledge the deeper problem at play. As the plane taxied down the runway, Marcus closed his eyes, trying to block out the noise. For the first time since the incident, he allowed himself to feel the weight of what had happened. Yes, he was used to scrutiny as a public figure, but this was different. It wasn't just about him. It was about the countless others who didn't have a platform to speak up. When the plane finally lifted off the ground, Marcus opened his laptop and began drafting an email to his board of directors. If the airline wouldn't take responsibility, perhaps it was time for someone else to step in. Hayes Global Technologies had recently invested heavily in travel tech startups, including a partnership with a rival airline. Marcus realized that this incident presented an opportunity, not just to hold the current airline accountable, but to push for meaningful change across the industry. By the time the flight reached cruising altitude, Marcus had outlined a bold plan. He would leverage his influence and the power of social media to demand transparency and reform, and if the airline refused to listen, he would redirect millions of dollars in corporate contracts to competitors who prioritized equity and customer dignity. Little did Marcus know, his actions over the next few hours would send shockwaves through the aviation world and cost the airline far more than they could have imagined. As the plane soared above the clouds, Marcus Hayes found himself at the center of a global conversation. What had started as a private dispute at Gate 32 was now a full-blown media storm, with news outlets picking up the story and analyzing every detail. Journalists dissected the viral video frame by frame, while pundits debated whether this was an isolated incident or evidence of systemic discrimination within the airline industry. Back on the ground, the airline's corporate office erupted into chaos. Executives gathered in an emergency meeting, their faces pale as they watched the hashtag, Fairness for All trend worldwide. Social media teams worked around the clock, attempting to mitigate the damage with carefully worded statements. That only seemed to make things worse. Calls flooded the customer service lines, not just complaints but also inquiries from corporate clients questioning their partnerships with the airline. One such call came from Sophie, Marcus's PR director, who reached out to the airline's CEO directly. Her tone was polite yet firm. "Mr. Peterson," Sophie began, addressing the airline's beleaguered CEO, "we need to discuss the recent incident involving our CEO, Marcus Hayes. This isn't just about one passenger. It's about trust and integrity. If you don't address this properly, it will affect your relationship with Hayes Global Technologies and likely other major partners as well." The airline's CEO, Richard Peterson, listened intently, his jaw tightening with each passing second. He knew Sophie wasn't bluffing. Hayes Global Technologies wasn't just another client. It was a cornerstone of the airline's corporate travel program, responsible for booking thousands of flights annually for employees and executives alike. Losing such a partnership would be catastrophic, not just financially, but also reputationally. Peterson leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Sophie, I assure you, we're taking this very seriously. We've already launched an internal investigation and will issue a formal apology once we have all the facts." Sophie's response was measured but unyielding. "That's a start, but it's not enough. Marcus is drafting a statement outlining his expectations for accountability. If you want to salvage this situation, you'll need to act quickly and transparently." Meanwhile, high above the Atlantic Ocean, Marcus finalized his statement. It was concise yet powerful, calling for 3 specific actions: a public acknowledgement of the bias involved, a commitment to diversity training for staff, and the implementation of stricter protocols to prevent similar incidents in the future. He attached a clause stating that failure to meet these demands would result in Hayes Global redirecting its business to competitor airlines. When the statement hit the internet, it sent shockwaves through the aviation industry. Competitor airlines seized the opportunity, reaching out to Hayes Global with offers of exclusive deals and assurances of superior service. One rival airline even proposed naming a new eco-friendly fleet after Marcus's company, a move designed to align themselves with his values of innovation and equity. By the time the plane began its descent into London, the airline's stock price had plummeted. Investors panicked as reports surfaced about potential cancellations of lucrative corporate contracts. Analysts estimated that the fallout could cost the airline upwards of $500 million, if not more, depending on how the situation unfolded. Inside the cabin, Marcus remained calm, his expression unreadable as he gazed out the window at the sprawling city below. He hadn't anticipated the scale of the backlash, but he couldn't deny feeling a sense of vindication. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. For too long, institutions like this airline had operated under the assumption that apologies and token gestures were enough to smooth over wrongdoing. But Marcus believed in holding people accountable, not just with words but with action. As the plane touched down, Marcus switched off his laptop and prepared to disembark. Reporters awaited him at the gate, eager to capture his reaction. But Marcus had no intention of giving them a soundbite. Instead, he planned to let his actions speak louder than any interview ever could. Stepping onto the jet bridge, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. This incident had reminded him why he fought so hard for fairness, not just in his own life but in the lives of others. And as he walked through the terminal, surrounded by flashing cameras and murmuring crowds, he made a silent vow. This wouldn't end here. The ripple effect of those 5 minutes at Gate 32 would continue until real change occurred. The following morning, Marcus Hayes stood in a sleek conference room at the London headquarters of Hayes Global Technologies. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a long table surrounded by reporters, cameras, and microphones. It was clear that this press conference would be unlike anything Marcus had ever done before. His usual tech-focused updates were now overshadowed by the viral incident aboard Flight 817. As he adjusted his tie and took a deep breath, Marcus reminded himself why he was here. This wasn't about personal vindication. It was about using his platform to shine a light on systemic issues that affected countless others. He glanced at Sophie, who gave him an encouraging nod from the sidelines. She had spent the night preparing him for every possible question, ensuring he stayed focused on the bigger picture. "Thank you all for joining me today," Marcus began, his voice steady and commanding as he addressed the crowded room. "I'm here not just as the CEO of Hayes Global Technologies, but as someone who believes deeply in fairness, respect, and accountability for everyone." He paused, letting his words sink in. The reporters leaned forward, pens poised, cameras rolling. Outside the building, live streams carried his message to millions around the world. "What happened on that flight wasn't an isolated event," Marcus continued. "It was a reflection of biases that exist within systems we interact with every day. These biases aren't always intentional, but they are real, and they have consequences." He went on to outline the 3 demands he had made to the airline: a public acknowledgement of bias, mandatory diversity training for employees, and stricter oversight to prevent similar incidents. Each point was met with nods of approval from the audience, some even applauding softly. "But let me be clear," Marcus added, his tone firm yet compassionate. "This isn't about punishing one airline or singling out individuals. It's about creating lasting change across industries. We can't afford to ignore these issues anymore. They affect not just passengers but also employees, shareholders, and communities." A reporter raised her hand, cutting through the murmurs of agreement. "Mr. Hayes, do you think the airline is taking your concerns seriously? And what happens if they don't comply?" Marcus smiled faintly, appreciating the directness of the question. "I believe they understand the gravity of the situation, but actions speak louder than words. If meaningful steps aren't taken to address these issues, Hayes Global will redirect its business to partners who share our values. Accountability starts with choices, and we're prepared to make ours." Another journalist chimed in. "Some critics argue that this has become less about customer service and more about race. How do you respond to that?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Bias doesn't always present itself in obvious ways. Sometimes it's subtle, embedded in policies or assumptions. What I experienced on that flight could happen to anyone. But when patterns emerge, we must confront them head on. This isn't just about me, it's about every traveler who deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their background." His response drew murmurs of approval from the crowd. Many attendees scribbled notes furiously, recognizing the weight of his words. Social media erupted once again, with viewers praising Marcus for addressing the issue with grace and conviction. After answering several more questions, Marcus wrapped up the press conference with a final statement. "Change begins when we hold ourselves and others accountable. Let's use this moment to build a future where fairness isn't the exception but the rule." As the room erupted into applause, Marcus stepped away from the podium, feeling a mix of exhaustion and resolve. He had laid down the gauntlet, challenging not only the airline but society as a whole to rethink how biases shaped everyday interactions. Outside the conference room, Sophie approached him, her expression a blend of pride and concern. "You handled that beautifully, Marcus. Now comes the hard part, the waiting game." Marcus nodded. We've done our part. It's up to them now. But even as he said the words, Marcus knew the airline wouldn't wait long to respond. The stakes were too high, and the clock was ticking. By refusing to back down, Marcus had forced their hand, and whatever decision they made next would ripple far beyond this single incident. Little did anyone know, the airline's response would come sooner than expected, and it would reveal cracks in their leadership that no one saw coming. The airline's boardroom was a tense and chaotic scene. Executives sat around a massive oak table, their faces etched with anxiety as they stared at the latest reports flashing across a large screen. The stock price had plummeted further overnight, dipping into levels not seen in over a decade. Calls from corporate clients like Hayes Global Technologies poured in, threatening to terminate contracts worth millions. Social media remained ablaze, with hashtags like Boycott Sky Airlines trending globally. Richard Peterson, the airline's beleaguered CEO, leaned forward, his voice strained but determined. We can't afford to lose Hayes Global or any of our other partners. If we don't act now, this could destroy us. His words hung heavy in the air. The executives exchanged uneasy glances, each aware of the enormity of the situation. For years, Sky Airlines had prided itself on being a leader in the aviation industry, known for its premium service and cutting-edge technology. But now, it faced an existential crisis, one sparked by what some still dismissed as a mere seating mix-up. We've drafted a formal apology, said Karen Liu, the head of public relations. It addresses Mr. Hayes directly and outlines steps we'll take to prevent similar incidents in the future. She slid a document across the table toward Peterson. But I'm not sure it's enough. People want action, not just words. Peterson skimmed the document quickly, his brow furrowing. This is too vague. We need something concrete, something that shows we're serious about change. Another executive chimed in. What if we announce a major initiative? Something big, like revamping our diversity training programs or launching a scholarship fund for underrepresented groups in aviation? The suggestion sparked a flurry of discussion. Ideas flew back and forth, ranging from symbolic gestures to sweeping reforms. But one thing became clear. Whatever they did, it had to be bold and fast. By mid-afternoon, the airline issued a statement titled, A Commitment to Change. It began with a heartfelt apology to Marcus Hayes, acknowledging the bias he experienced and pledging full accountability. The announcement went on to outline several initiatives: mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all employees, the creation of an external advisory board to oversee policy changes, and a $10 million investment in scholarships aimed at increasing representation within the airline industry. The press release concluded with a personal note from Peterson himself. We failed Marcus Hayes and we failed our passengers. This is unacceptable and we are committed to doing better, for everyone. The statement garnered mixed reactions. Some praised the airline for taking responsibility, while others accused them of performative activism, pointing out that such measures should have been implemented long ago. Critics argued that the airline was simply trying to save face rather than addressing deeper systemic issues. Meanwhile, Marcus received the statement via email during a meeting with his leadership team. He read it carefully, his expression unreadable. When Sophie asked for his thoughts, he set the phone down and leaned back in his chair. It's a start, Marcus said finally. But actions speak louder than promises. Let's see how they follow through. Sophie nodded, sensing his measured skepticism. Do you think they're sincere? Marcus shrugged. It doesn't matter whether they're sincere or desperate. What matters is whether these changes actually happen, and whether they make a difference. Later that evening, Marcus found himself alone in his hotel suite, staring out at the London skyline. Despite the whirlwind of events, he felt strangely calm. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Holding institutions accountable rarely was, but he also knew that moments like this, moments when people were forced to confront uncomfortable truths, had the power to spark real change. As he scrolled through social media, Marcus noticed something remarkable. Inspired by his stance, Travelers from around the world were sharing their own stories of bias and discrimination. A movement was building, one that extended far beyond the confines of a single flight or airline. Hashtags like "Why Fairness for All" and "Inarn Travel with Dignity" gained traction, uniting voices across continents. For the first time since the incident, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about creating a ripple effect that would challenge industries to do better. And though the battle was far from over, he could already see glimpses of progress. Unbeknownst to Marcus, however, the airline's internal struggles were far from resolved. Behind closed doors, tensions simmered among its leadership, with some questioning whether the proposed reforms were worth the cost. In their desperation to salvage their reputation, they made a decision that would soon come back to haunt them, a decision that would test Marcus's resolve once again. The airline's internal discord reached a breaking point just days after their public apology. While the executives had agreed to announce sweeping reforms, not everyone on the board was convinced of their necessity or sincerity. Behind closed doors, whispers of dissent grew louder. Some members argued that the initiatives were too costly and unnecessary, dismissing them as mere damage control. Others feared that admitting fault would open the floodgates for lawsuits and further scrutiny. In an attempt to appease both sides, the airline quietly scaled back several key components of their proposed changes. The $10 million scholarship fund was reduced to $2 million, diversity training sessions were shortened, and plans for an external advisory board were postponed indefinitely. To the public, the airline maintained its image of progress, but insiders knew the truth. Word of these decisions leaked online within hours, thanks to an anonymous whistleblower who shared internal documents with journalists. Headlines screamed betrayal. Sky Airlines backtracks on promises amid scandal, and empty gestures. Airline cuts corners on diversity reforms. Social media erupted once again, this time with renewed fury. Passengers vowed to boycott the airline entirely, while corporate clients began pulling out contracts en masse. Marcus Hayes watched the fallout unfold from his office in London, his expression unreadable. When Sophie entered the room, she found him staring at a live newsfeed showing protesters gathered outside Sky Airlines headquarters. Their signs read stark messages like, "Justice over profit," and "Actions speak louder than words." "They've made their choice," Marcus said quietly, turning away from the screen. "Now it's time we make ours." Sophie hesitated. "What do you mean?" Marcus stood, his demeanor calm, but resolute. "We gave them a chance to lead by example, to show the world what accountability looks like. Instead, they chose shortcuts, so now we'll send a message that can't be ignored." That evening, Marcus issued a statement through Hayes Global Technologies. It was brief, but powerful. When institutions fail to uphold their promises, silence is complicity. Effective immediately, Hayes Global will terminate all partnerships with Sky Airlines. Furthermore, we are launching a coalition of businesses committed to supporting equitable practices in travel and beyond. Change starts with action, and we're taking ours today. The announcement sent shockwaves through the business community. Within hours, other corporations followed suit, severing ties with the embattled airline. Competitors seized the opportunity, offering incentives to win over disillusioned customers and partners. By the end of the week, analysts estimated that Sky Airlines had lost over $500 million in revenue, money they couldn't afford to lose. As the dust settled, Marcus reflected on the events that had unfolded. What began as a simple seating dispute had grown into something far greater, a catalyst for accountability and systemic reform. He knew the fight wasn't over. Biases ran deep, and dismantling them required sustained effort. But he also knew that moments like this mattered. They reminded people of the power of collective action. Months later, Marcus returned to New York for a charity gala honoring leaders in equality and innovation. As he accepted an award on stage, he addressed the audience with heartfelt gratitude. "This journey taught me that fairness isn't just a principle, it's a responsibility. And when we stand together, Demanding better for ourselves and others, we create ripples that turn into waves. His words earned a standing ovation, but Marcus didn't linger in the spotlight. After the event, he boarded a flight home, not with Sky Airlines, but with one of their competitors who had embraced his vision of equity. As the plane ascended into the night sky, Marcus gazed out the window, feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction. Change was never easy, but it was possible. And sometimes all it took was 5 minutes at Gate 32 to remind the world of that truth.